Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Matt, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Absolutely, Brian. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'm Matt Lassen, currently a regional manager with Safe Haven ADT. Grew up in Iowa, youngest of three, fantastic parents. Was a sports kid, so played basketball. That took me into college. Got a business management degree, minor in communications. Jumped into sales right out of college and been there ever since.
And how have you liked it?
I've loved it. I absolutely have loved it. It's luckily for me, it correlated to sports a lot, but just in general, even if I put sports aside, um, it's just a fantastic industry. I mean, the biggest thing is just the connections you build and the skill sets you get that you can apply anywhere.
And what are you selling today? Is it
So
physical
ADT, home security. Yep.
home security? Cool.
Yep.
And is it door to door? Is it on the phone? Or is it?
So this one, really, since I've been with ADT, I've been in the sales management role, which I did in my last company a little bit, but the bulk of my selling was B2B office supplies.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So which was door to door to door, selling office supplies. So
Was that rough?
yeah, it absolutely was definitely rough at times. I mean, office supplies, it's as transactional as it gets. You know, paper's paper, ink is ink. It's just, do I beat your price or do I not?
Yeah.
But obviously, you know, going door to door to door, and the thing I love about B2B is everybody's there. You know, you can't walk into a business without having to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
You know, and my little experience in residential, there's a lot of not homes. So you don't have to have a conversation every single time. So B2B was definitely rough, a lot more rejection, obviously. But I'm very thankful I did it.
And now you're in leadership. Is that true?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
how was that transition for you?
It was fun. I mean, it really, really was, because I stumbled into sales. I didn't necessarily,
Plan on it?
my whole life I didn't know how. Yeah, you know what I mean. I didn't have this. Yeah, I'm going into sales my whole life. I mean, I
Right.
quite frankly, I went to college for basketball, and then it's just I really understood early on a couple of things about sales. Number one, I just saw value in being able to communicate with people. I saw that, a lot of value of being able to communicate, cultivate relationships quickly, help people make decisions with people, just communication in general. I'm like, man, wherever I go, I'm going to have that. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And then, the other thing, quite frankly, I understood, and I laugh because unfortunately it seems a lot of people don't. I knew my first job out of college was going to suck. I knew I was probably going to work a lot of hours and
Yeah.
not
You
make
were
much
going to be
money.
CEO.
Exactly. Right. I'm like, man, I'm going to be doing coffee runs probably. But the transition into it is I understood the value of it. So transitioning into leadership, I saw what it can do for people, whether they stay in sales or not. Some of my closest connections were with me for a few years and I trained them in sales. And now they're not even in the sales industry, but they're crushing their industry because of what they learned in sales. I just kind of see it as, once you can get through that sales door, holy cow, is there a lot of doors on the other side of that.
Well, that's it. You kind of understand how other people think, how to have a conversation instead of just a transaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but what was the motive to get into management? Because you probably could do better financially as a rep, no?
No, I mean, I'll be honest. I'd be lying if I said I didn't see the financial gain of getting into sales management.
Yeah.
I totally understood that, but truthfully, I just really, really, really enjoy developing people. I like seeing people go from A to B, not only with their own life, but their skill sets. I remember early on, I went to a social event with one of my reps, one of my employees, and he was just kind of awkward, didn't really start any conversations. 3 months later, we were at a bar, having dinner and stuff, and he could talk to anybody about anything, didn't matter, pure confidence. That's the stuff that I just became obsessed with.
Yeah.
And then I'll just be honest, I learned I kind of a natural ability for coaching and teaching. And I think it comes from my father, but it just became really addicting to teach people these things and see them be able to apply them to so many different parts of life. And then obviously, having control over income was really fun to watch people access to.
And what do you look for when you're hiring?
I look for a couple things. I think, obviously, work ethic, and coachability are the obvious ones. Without those, it's going to be a
Not gonna
real
happen.
uphill battle. Yeah, it's just not right. And so I think coachability more than anything, work ethic, quite frankly, in my opinion, a lot of people say you can't teach work ethic. I think you can. I think that I can go out and I can show you how hard I'm willing to work. And if you watch, you're going to realize one or the other. Whether you follow through, that's on the person, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you
But I think
ask any drill instructor if he can teach work ethic.
right. See, I see it. It's definitely no, I feel you, Brian. It's a double-edged sword. There's no doubt about it. But the coachability thing is incredibly important. I see it's almost to the point when I joke with people, I almost prefer hiring people without sales experience because I don't have to de-wire a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And go through the battles of, listen, I know you probably crushed your last company, but this is a new thing. This is a new product, a new company you're selling for. There's going to be different processes, right? So I almost prefer getting the person that doesn't have, because anything that they now know in their systems are going to be from me and from the ground up. So they don't know anything else. And I see that breed a lot more consistency. But really, the other thing I look for when I'm hiring is what I mentioned earlier, perspective. I just look for people that understand it's not supposed to be easy. I'm not going to get my dream job right away. And I'm not going to join a company and be high level management right away. That just doesn't happen,
Right.
So I really look for perspective. I think the perspective is incredibly important when hiring people.
And as far as work ethic, how do you tell that during the interview process? Do you look for certain things in their background, adversities?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of everything. It's definitely with their story, right? It's asking some of the right questions of, if I asked you, regardless of result, what's something that you were incredibly proud that you worked at, your work ethic, what would you rate it above everything else, right? And depending on their answer, and then of course things in their past, if I see somebody that's worked 80, 90 hours a week for the past 3 or 4 years, I think they might know how to work hard.
Yeah. How about like industry?
Yeah.
What, like any background in particular industries?
Yeah, I mean, I love recruiting athletes.
Yeah.
I know athletes isn't necessarily a work industry, right? But I do love recruiting athletes because they understand a couple things. And one, sales is a game. I got to develop my game. I have to add things to my game. I got to get better.
Yeah.
It's performance based. If I want the best territory, if I want the most sales, I got to humble myself and work harder than the next guy. And then the other thing is the schedule, right? It's they're used to adversity and problems coming up, whether, it's athlete, okay, I'm sore today, but I still got to go play.
Yeah.
So sales, all right, I got some personal stuff going on. I still got to go sell. So I just see a lot of correlations there. And then I think it depends on the person. I really care about what somebody's looking for. I get the roundabout of experience and it's important, but I think that, like I told if you asked me early on, I wouldn't have told you sales, but if you asked me a year after sales, I knew what I wanted out of the sales industry. So I think it kind of comes down to what people have shaped and what they see for themselves.
Yeah, because there's a lot of analogies to sports: winning,
Mm-hmm.
losing, practicing, uh, getting feedback from your team and from a coach.
Absolutely.
And what you state is like you're not going to feel like doing it a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
but you
Mm-hmm.
still got to do it.
Exactly.
And even though you know how to dribble, doesn't mean you don't dribble today. Right?
Exactly. You're exactly spot on. You're totally spot on. And hot streaks and cold streaks, you're right. There's so many countless analogies.
And I also get the people who have already sold tend to have a way of doing it. And
Yeah.
that may work for that industry in that territory at that time, but
Right.
you have to be open-minded.
Exactly. And I'm not going to sit here and say I don't want someone with sales experience. Of course, it helps in certain ways. Sales is a language. Not having any doubtful language and knowing when to say what, and that that's just kind of general. You can apply that to sales. So there's positives out it, but you're totally right. A lot of people have, they get stuck in their old ways and they really don't want to break them.
The only thing about athletes is that they're not necessarily social creatures, and that they almost can't party in some cases, right?
Yep.
For
Yeah.
health
No,
reasons and
you're exactly
sleeping
right.
in and stuff like that.
Yep.
And their communication is pretty limited, and sometimes it's almost symbolic in
Mm-hmm.
hand gestures and stuff versus words and empathizing with, but you do have to, I guess, especially in
You're right.
basketball, read what the other player is going to do.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the skill set that I've learned to love from them is the toughness, right? Because I always tell people, I said, listen, there's nothing a customer is going to say to your face that was worth, that was worse running at 5 a.m. till you threw up. It's just not going to
Yeah.
happen, right? And then the skill set of just learning how to learn things, because they had to learn this sport and learn how to get better. So I trust that skill set a lot. If you can adapt and be willing to learn, most sales industries, at least the good ones, have systems in place to help people like that.
And how often do you find yourself being more of a personal trainer as a leader versus a coach? The personal trainer is the one that you hire because you don't have the accountability and the structure and the process. The coach is to get
Yep.
better. You know what to do, but you want to
Yep.
get better at it.
That's exactly right. I think with most people, it comes with tenure. Early on, I'm coaching, I'm a trainer. I'm coaching you to number one, get in shape. Okay. You got to learn how to handle this rejection. You got to learn how to work this lead list and work these hours and learn this material. And that's where I'm on you. And I'm much more a personal trainer. And I'm going to, I always am big on setting expectations. I usually tell my, listen, there's going to be some times early on in your career here, you're not going to like me, but I
Yeah.
promise you'll appreciate down the road me pushing you here, right? Because you told me you want to make this amount of money, you want to have this amount of life. I've seen it done. So I'm going to push you to that point, right? And then once the ability is there, it becomes much more of a coaching role. It becomes much more of, I'm going to give advice, but I'm just a big encourager. Come to me for advice once we got this ability down. I
Yeah.
don't need to micromanage you anymore. I don't need to super train you, but you need to be humble enough and willing enough to come to me, even if it's something simple like, God, I feel really weird about this objection recently. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it kind of just transitions as that ability begins to develop and stack up.
Yeah. And what's the hardest part of your job?
Um, Man, I would say just dealing with the different personalities. That's something I've really come to learn is, blanket coaching doesn't work. It just doesn't. And it's really hard to get out of. But boy, does coaching and teaching everybody the same way not work. And we don't need to get on a harp or anything like that. I'm not necessarily going to go down that road, but the education, that teacher gets up and teaches in front of a room and they kind of have to blanket teach, but that's why some people excel and some people don't. And obviously some students, their own fault, right? I was victim of that. But dealing with all these different personalities and knowing, what, this person I can push a little bit, I can give it, kind of some hard coaching, but this person, boy, if I take that route, their confidence is just going to go out the window and it's going to be hard to get back. So,
Well, that is very different than because in basketball, people are the same age, they're in the same period of life, they have the same responsibilities. So you
yep.
can kind of group teach them. But once we become adults, it's like our lives are different, our goals are different, how we learn is different. And too many managers try and I want somebody just like me who
Yeah.
learns my way.
Yep.
And that never works.
Exactly. Right. If you're looking for more people like you, it's going to take a while to build. You're exactly right.
And have you made any hiring mistakes that you really learned good lessons from?
Yeah, it's always a goal of mine. My first job, tons of turnover. I mean, just a large amount. It was 80, 90 hours a week for, office supplies is one of those where I'm closing a high volume of accounts, 10, 20 a week, but my commissions are real low.
Yeah.
Right. So it was tough when I'd have someone close 12 accounts, but their order size was so low. They made $200-300. It's like, all right, you're closing well, but you're not making money. That's kind of tough to go about. Right. But I think that, with my route and what my guys are doing now, okay, the most important thing is making sure that the culture is set. I think that is something that is just beyond important because, boy, a culture can get you through some negatives. It can get you through some tough times. And I hate to keep going back to basketball, but if anybody tells you they like conditioning, they're lying. It's not fun. But when you got your teammates around you, it's not so bad. Right. So I think that culture is incredibly important.
Yeah. And that is kind of that routine. And is there camaraderie because each one's an individual contributor? So that they're on your team, but they don't really
Right.
work together, right?
Right. So I hold 3 meetings a week. Right. So we'll come in and I'll be, what I've really liked about this company is the turnover's not there.
Oh,
I've had the same 8 guys for, a year and a half, 2 years now. So I've been able to do a lot of development, which is a lot more fun. But I bring them in because, culture is important. And then empowering people, I think, is really important. It increases this, right? So, if somebody comes in and they did 2 sales the day before, you bet they're speaking at the beginning of the meeting. What'd you do well yesterday? What do you feel worked? Because I guarantee somebody's going to pick that up and take it and do well. And luckily, I'm in an industry where it's not first one to get there type of sales. Everybody has their own territory.
yeah.
So better someone does in their territory, we might as well spread that across and learn together. And then also fun stuff. It's nice when you're out there making your sales by yourself in your own car, but knowing well that those 6, 7 other guys are out doing the same thing as you, and you're going to see them at the office the next day. And win or lose, you got those guys to go back to.
And how do you keep it friendly competitive versus adversarial competitive?
Yeah. See, I struggled with this one, Brian. It's tough, right? It's really, really hard. I loved, and again, maybe it's the athlete, but I just love those kind of grueling competitions. Let's get in it. Let's get after it. Talk trash to each other. Let's have fun, because competition breeds better performance. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Right. But really what it comes down to, I think, is just managing expectations. And then, in sales, I think something that's really popular, obviously, is incentives and competitions, and what I learned early on is thinking about, what do I want to come out of this competition? Right. So recently I did one to, built off of consistency. Right. And everybody was in a room, okay, in a hypothetical room. And as long as you don't go 2 days in a row without a sale, you're out of that room. Right. So if I don't get a sale for 2 days in a row, I'm out of the room. And the only way I get to come back in is if I get 3 in a day. Last person standing in the room wins. Right.
Yeah.
So it's managing, obviously. Listen, but I made sure that it went for 2 weeks minimum. So the first 2 weeks, they had to keep everybody in. And then after 2 weeks, free for all, everybody go for it. So it kind of helped bridge that gap a little bit. But when you really think about, what do I want to come out of this? Not for me as a manager, X amount of sales, X amount of dollars. What do I want my reps to get out of this? Consistency came to mind. And then it's funny what your mind will do and shape things around that and keep it friendly and productive. So the guys feel fun, but I'm getting better. I'm getting value out of this thing as well.
And do you look for that competitiveness in the hiring process?
I do. I do mostly internal. I look for somebody that is looking for, the next thing. They're looking for this. They're looking for that. They don't have I just want to be comfortable and stability. And listen, those are things that I get it. Right. But okay, let's get you comfortable and stable. Do you really want to stay there? Right. Or do we want to continue this exponential? So I look for kind of long-term goals, and do you have anything planned for yourself? And not necessarily this next step, but where is this next step? What's the step after that? That type of stuff. I think that I look for internal competition.
And how do you balance the activity versus accomplishment thing? Because a lot of managers, a number of calls versus wins, closes,
Mm-hmm.
And certainly in your space, I bet you could spend a lot of time not selling, but being busy. Yeah.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And that's obviously, that's the time where it all creeps in. Is sales really for me? Is this what I want to do long term? Gosh, if I don't sell, I'm not going to make much money. Sales is fantastic when it's going well. Easy to think about those goals, but boy, is it difficult when it's not going the best. Right. So I think, the activity, I think, something that's really worked for me and I've seen good results from is making the activity a standard. It's weird if you don't make X amount of calls, or it's not okay if you don't go hit this amount of doors or hit this amount of, that is the standard here. That's an investment. If the activity's not there, I'm gambling. And you bet I might go out and only work 2 hours in the field and I might make a sale. And boy, does that cripple somebody's career. That's like the worst. I hope if they get out late, they don't make a sale. Because I've been victim when I hop out and I go out for an hour and I make 2 sales. I'm like, God, I can do this every day. It doesn't work that way. If my activity is in, that's an investment. If it's not, I'm gambling. And then once that is in place, then can we only truly study the accomplishments, in my opinion. I can't give you a real amount or standard for your accomplishments or your potential. If the activity is not there, we're not working, we're not doing the the bare minimum. But once activity's in the bank, all right, let's look at what our numbers look like, and we can adjust from there. You're working hard, but clearly something needs to go better within those hours.
Yeah. And what do you think differentiates like that top rep from the rest?
Mm-hmm.
Don't have to give names or people, or even the top three versus the others, but
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And obviously this is something that, sales managers think about all the time is how can I, what separates, how do I get these guys just to an elite level? And I think something I've found, and I've really, really adopted this over the past few years, is somebody that will put performance behind them instead of in front of them. And what I mean by that is I see a lot of people who performance is just right here, all I can think about, all I can smell, look at, no matter what. And it's good intention. I want to succeed. I want to be the top performer. And early on when I was training, I'd be like, God, this guy's got the best attitude. He's working his tail off. He's not selling. And then I'd go watch him and I'd be like, oh my God, he's really trying to make it happen. He's incredibly commission breathy. And it was good intention because, again, he's just trying to crush.
Yeah.
But those people that I see, they can put performance behind them. And I view it as something, it's an obligation for me for success to follow me. If I lead with my habits, my actions, being a student and getting good at things, working the next, outworking the next guy, success is going to follow me.
Yeah.
And then I think if I see people hit a slump and they turn around, success, and performance is not there. And like, oh my God, where'd I lose it? And then it takes a while to get it back. But then when they get it back and they view it as an obligation, like, God, I have to, I got to do the right stuff. So this thing stays behind me and I'll just keep pulling it along. I think that's something that I've seen separate a lot of people, especially when they get good, because they just want that performance and it's right in front of their nose and they can't see outside of it. It comes out of their mouth.
Yeah, because they associate that if the performance is all that matters, as opposed to how well they did it.
Exactly.
And if you trust the process and you're good at it, the performance or the outcome will naturally happen. Not every time.
Right. And that's where I know. Yeah. But it's much more, that's where I see a lot more mental stability come into, because sales, once you get the ability, it's almost all mental. Yeah. But it's a lot easier for me to control success behind me and what I'm leading with, because I have a lot better control over my habits and what I'm doing and who I'm learning from and who's in my ear coaching me, versus I don't have much control over success and performance in the grand scheme of the word. So it just puts people, they feel a lot more in control of what they got going on.
And then, like, certainly the new people, it's time to accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
Because until they get that first deal, it's constant questioning what's working, what's not working.
Yep.
And that's it. You get that little bit of accomplishment, but not too much that they only look for that.
Exactly. Right. And I think that's why culture is so important, because boy, if you're in that office and you're going through those struggles and you don't have people to look at that went through the same thing, and boy, are they doing well now, it's hard to see, it's hard to see.
And how do you keep yourself balanced without kind of like telling people what to do, kind of guiding people on what they think they should do?
What's funny about that one is I've actually taken something that I learned early on in sales, and I've really learned to apply into the coaching world, is ask the right questions. I think, a lot of salespeople, they struggle, and it makes sense to me. We all like the sound of our own voice. Yeah. But the whole time they're pitching and getting their stuff down is they're thinking about how they sound. I got to sound perfect, this tone, I got to nail this objection, overturn all this stuff. Instead of, if you can learn to ask the right questions, the customer will sell themselves. Yeah. And you'll identify this need, right? And you'll be able to solve that, the basic sales 101. But coaching wise, instead of me just throwing coaching at you based off of what I might want to hear, or what I think you might want to hear based on someone else I've already previously coached, I'm just going to ask you, right? So if the call comes in and, God, I'm just really struggling today. Well, what's going on? Talk to me about your day. Okay. How many presentations have you had today? Okay. 4. Let's talk about them. All right. 3 of those gave you the same objection. Stop freaking out. We got one thing to fix. But based on asking the right questions, and I kind of let them empty it all out, then I can properly coach more accurately. And then I get to fill them back up with the things I need that, that they need, instead of just kind of taking a stab in the dark and hoping my coaching works.
Well, that's it. Because if you just tell them, oh, you got one objection, let's come up with a better way. It's like, well, what do you think? would be a better
Mhm.
way of doing it. Get them thinking and owning it.
Yep.
Because if they just do what you tell
Exactly.
them, it doesn't work, it's your fault. If it doesn't
Mhm.
work and it's their idea, it's their fault.
Exactly. I mean, it always tends to be the manager's fault, right, Brian? But at the end of the
Yeah,
day,
of
you're totally, yeah,
course. You
that's
told me to
exactly
do
right.
it that way.
Yeah, yep,
And,
yep.
and how do you develop yourself? You're clearly, attached to this and you like it. What do you do?
Um, Mentors. I'm really big on the networking thing. I'm really big on the finding people that have done it,
Yeah.
that are doing what I'm trying to do. There's nothing wrong with me asking them how they got there. I mean, my goodness, it's the simplest things. My dad learned to drive a car. When he taught me a few things that, he didn't teach me a few things because he taught me a few different ones. There's always things to learn from someone that already, has done it. Listen, reading and, social media. I think that those are obviously very relevant right now. And what most people don't understand, and I didn't for the longest time, but you have control over it. I wasn't getting much from my social media. I went in and looked at who I was following. I was like, no wonder I'm still following a bunch of,
The idiots.
blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's a bunch of idiots, a bunch of people drinking every weekend. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. So then, I go tap in and I follow people like you and I listen to your stuff every day. And, it's funny what happens when you just put that stuff in your ear, what it can do for you. And then just always find and just be humble, it took me a while when you get into sales, and I was naturally good when I started. So it was easy
Yeah.
to be confident with it and a little bit cocky, but learning to step back and be humble, boy, did I develop a lot quicker and was able to learn a lot better, and level myself up.
Yeah. And is your dad still active and helping you
I,
develop
he,
this?
I mean, he's, God, my mom calls him Mr. Perfect. It's unbelievable. He's just an incredible guy. He was a software engineer, same college, same company out of college all the way through. He retired a couple years ago, but
Yeah.
his example helps me. I mean, he's just, oh man, yeah. Executing is what he taught me. The biggest thing he taught me is talk is not cheap; it's free. But those that can execute even the daily small stuff. All right, you got a flat tire, call
Fix it.
some shops, get
Yeah.
it in there, get back out and do your sales, right? That just being able to execute is something that he's really taught me.
Yeah. And what advice would you have for a first-time sales leader?
Go for the experience, right? Or first time sales leader or first time sales rep, sorry.
Sales leader.
Sales leader.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't expect much credit, right? You won't get it. And listen, some people get into leadership all for the credit. I saw it all the time. People wanted to be the captain of the team, but then the team lost, and I don't want to be the captain anymore.
No.
Right. So it's understanding that aspect. And I think my biggest piece of advice would be, when you win, always blame your team, no matter what. If we win, it was about you guys. If we lose, even if I did everything right, I'm going to find a way to blame myself. I think that allows a heavy, heavy amount of retention and buy-in from your team. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And managers think they can't screw up ever because, boy, will I lose the credibility of my whole team. Wrong. It's how you screw up and the expectations that were set on the front end. And if the team fails, it was me, guys. I could do more for you. Let's dive into this together, that type of thing. That would probably be my biggest piece of advice.
Well, that personal ownership is key, because when
Mm-hmm.
people see that, then they replicate it.
Exactly.
If you don't have that, you assume it's someone else's fault and you don't learn anything and you don't develop.
Yep. Yep. I know. Yeah, and that's a slippery slope.
Definitely. Hey, I really appreciate your time and enjoyed this conversation. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Matt Lassen, Lassen, and that's really kind of my main source of social media, as well as Facebook. I'm just pretty active on those two things, and I got some more contact info through those two platforms. So